I'll request the panelists to join me as I call out to them. I'd like to call Atul on the stage. Atul, please. So Atul, to introduce him, Atul is one of the most experienced PE fund managers. Please, sir, बैठिए आप. Please. He's one of the most experienced fund managers that I have worked with. He's, for the last 15 years, he's been with Premji Invest, investing across multiple sectors, very big brands that he has invested and helped grow, like First Cry, and a whole bunch of that we'll cover as we go along. I think meeting too many entrepreneurs has not been very good for you, or good for you, we'll see. He's decided to start his own fund, and Trident Capital Partners, Growth Partners. For those who might have seen in the newspaper a few days back, there was some news about being backed by Ranjan Pai and others. So it's a $250 million fund, and I will let Atul talk about it too.
Thank you, Samir. Thanks everybody for basically listening to me here. So I think after 15 years at Premji Invest, which has been a fantastic platform and place to obviously invest and back the founders in their growth journeys, it was obviously interesting for me to start out again from ground zero. After 15 years, I think the whole idea was that loved working with founders at early growth stages. And I think this journey gives me that opportunity all over again, because I think at the prior employer, of course, the fund size and everything was becoming very big. And as a result, basically the focus was turning to much larger transactions in much later stage companies. So I think this kind of gives the full rewind back to where I started, as I enjoy doing that.
But why didn't you aim to do a bit earlier than what you were doing at Premji?
No, about similar sizes. When I came into Lenskart or Policy Bazaar or Amagi or some of these companies, they were pretty much about the same sizes as we are kind of targeting at Trident.
We'll cover some of your interest areas in the conversation.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Ritu to come on stage. Thank you, Ritu. I just discovered that Ritu and I have a lot in common. We've come from the same city, have the same interests, therefore. And Ritu is part of Chirate, a firm that I hold in great respect. Been one of the earliest VC firms in India, pioneer in that sense. 2006 is when this started. And very importantly, they are an embodiment of Viksit Bharat in some sense, where they decide to drop the IDG appendage and become Chirate. It's a bold move because that was a bet on being able to raise in the private markets from people like yourselves. And I know some of you guys have backed funds like this and others. So they are an entrepreneur in their own right. Sometimes we forget that. And I'd like Ritu to introduce herself and speak a little bit about Chirate.
Good evening, everyone. Really happy to be around here. Chirate Ventures is one of India's largest domestic VC fund. We are almost 18 years old. We started in 2006 by Sudhir Sethi and TC Meenakshi Sundaram, who've known each other for over 35 years. We currently manage about $1.3 billion. It's been an amazing journey throughout, and we've seen a lot of our companies which, have reached heights. In fact, one of our investing companies, First Cry, is going into an IPO this week. So, a lot of learnings during this journey. We've made mistakes, we've had successes, and we're continuing this journey. We will talk about it more as we go ahead.
Now I'd like to invite Tej to come on. Tej not only is a person I've worked with, but one of my buddies. And Tej is one of the very early stage investors. I don't know how he does it, where they seem to make calls which don't have much cash flow to show to them, but they still seem to make a lot of money on them. Tej has recently joined ICICI Ventures, which needs no introduction. And interestingly, Tej will bring to them his early stage investing capabilities. So we have a few questions for you on that. Tej, a few words from you.
Great to be here, and congratulations, Samir, for great platform. Yeah, I've worked with him on many deals, so it's like coming back home. And all of them have been good deals. Ixigo, Delivery, which both went public, and number of other deals. So I was with Fosun for a number of years, almost 6.5 years. And we saw that cycle of 21, which we'll discuss, I'm sure. So we started investing in 2016 and exiting in 21. So we had a lot of exit focus, and as a result, it was good timing. And now I'm building a new vertical at ICICI Venture, where we're raising about 1,000 crore. It's from scratch, so that is what excited me to join. Like Atul was just mentioning, there's something nice to do startups again and again. So my journey started with setting up Naspers, then Daily Mail Group, then Fosun, and now ICICI Venture. So we'll be doing more late stage investing, $10 million ticket sizes coming in Series B. I'll leave it here and then we'll discuss more.
The question for you really is that the Viksit Bharat, which is the theme of today's conversation, is a plan for 2047. We are probably 22 years away from now. You guys run funds which are, best 4 plus 4 plus 2, right? Well, max 12, right? How does one, it's almost like an asset liability mismatch of a bank, right? How do you actually align yourself? Because obviously these policies are the policies that enable growth in the country, which is what you want to back. So your thoughts on that?
So I think if you really think about it, even the policies are made in stages, right? And it is really incumbent on the success in the previous policies. Means when we started building highways, means the first year there was a certain mileage that they built, which was about 10 or 11,000 crores, is what I think, 1,000 kilometers, sorry. And then the next year was 14, and so on and so forth. So similarly, I think it is not a static target that you have to just go from here to there, which is similar to the companies that we invest in generally, right? Means it is always basically calibrating ourselves continuously with the market conditions and everything. So as geopolitics change, some of those things may change a little bit. So as a result, I think from when we look at it, I think we have to look at that we are kind of aligning with it over 3 fund cycles or 2 fund cycles, right? And I think we are really aligning to next 10 years, how does India look like, or how would the companies look like? And as a result, I think some of the sectors that we are picking is primarily focused around that growth, which is aligning with the Viksit Bharat mission or the statement. So I think that's generally how, as funds, we like to think. So as a result, I think the focus for us as a fund has been more around basically we kind of rode the first wave, which was whole technology-enabled businesses. And I think that trend is still extremely, extremely important because businesses that are not adopting technology are probably going to be at the verge of being extinction to some extent, because in some way you have to think about productivity, in some way you have to think about efficiency, and how you become much more agile, right?
A related question to that, what you just said though, and tying it up with the public market conversation we had, more technology means lesser employment for the people, and so impact that other vision, which is a big challenge, by the way.
Not really, in my view, because I think you kind of focus. Means when internet was coming, people said a lot of jobs will go obsolete, and what will people do? Means we are kind of a human-focused industry, right? And means IT services business, in fact, grew much more after that. Similarly, I think now AI is coming, and people are worried about that AI is going to wipe out jobs. I think it's going to wipe out a lot of mundane jobs, right? Means drafting, for example. You probably don't need people for drafting. I think it can do a fabulous job. But at the same time, there is a new field in computer science coming, which is prompt engineering. how to ask questions, right? Because there's so much data available and you don't have a context. The machine doesn't have a context, right?
Yep.
So it can do the most complex jobs, but lifting a bottle in a hand is something machine can't do. So I think it is about basically prompting, and there are many other things that will open up as a result. And in my view, let's look at what the world is today versus before the internet era. I think there are more jobs, more high-end jobs, and more companies that have come around. So in our view, basically, I think exactly the same thought process we have, that as we go forward and forward, you will see much more new business models that will emerge as a result.
No, I completely agree with you. I was earlier in the day in another event, and I met up with a tech company who said that they actually get far more CVs for tech part, but they don't get enough CVs for content writing, customer support, and those quality. And we were talking with another startup founder there who's looking at the entire commerce student people that are coming out and seem to be really unskilled, but a huge opportunity in some sense. So I completely agree with you.
No, so I think one of the other trends, for example, I have seen, I think the first generation of e-commerce to tech companies, they were built on creating technology because there was no such infrastructure. And if you look at today's companies that are coming in the same space, they are able to do better with lesser number of people in the same set of jobs.
Correct.
And I think it also talks about efficiency, but now as a result, they are focusing on their core. Because actually, if you really think about a financial services company, the core is financial services.
Yes.
Technology is the enabler.
Yes.
While previously, if you look at Gen 1 companies, they were spending way too much money on developing technology and probably getting completely defocused from the core.
Good.
So I think it is coming back from that perspective to focus on the core.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go sequence-wise. So next is Tej, right? So Tej, you joined ICICI Ventures, which is known for doing large ticket deals and profitable companies. And tech companies, by very definition, early stage companies are there to focus first on solving a problem. And so how are you going to align this? And I'm sure they say that yes, we'll support you, like everybody would. But how are you aligning this large organization to the desired outcome to invest in tech companies and be willing to live with the challenges that come with tech companies?
Yeah, so I think the answer is in the statement, I love challenges. So, but I think it is, like I think that as an organization, ICICI is very forward looking. I mean, I don't want to brag here, but I'm an ICICI customer since the time I graduated from my college here, my first job out of Christ College. And, I've been, I mean, there was no app back then, but I've been their client since then. And I think they've adopted tech very well. I think the management is quite forward looking. Actually, if you go back in time, they were the first venture capital in India.
That's right.
Actually, they were investors in InfoEdge with Sanjeev. So I think it's almost like rebirth of the venture practice there. Actually, they are more excited than me. So I'm telling them, let's calm down. Let's not invest in everything. Things don't work. So I think eventually we have to, obviously. But yeah, it's a good mix. I think on the fintech side, we do have an advantage because a lot of the fintech companies are either clients.
Agreed.
Or they are, serving to ICICI. So I think there is a advantage there, whether it's on the different side, lending, etc. And consumer, thankfully, I have good understanding. So those are the two focus areas for us. In terms of burning money, we will still be very cognizant of the fact that the founders are not burning for acquisition of customers and just for the heck of it, which you and I always discuss, Sumer, versus burning for growth. Burning for growth is okay. So we'll continue with that theme rather than, backing founders who just want to have number one spot with number one valuation. We don't care about that. It's more about value creation. So yeah, so that's what I think. It'll be interesting, So meeting of the minds.
Yes, we'll wait to hear the announcements. We've just heard the announcement that your first close at 700 crores has happened. And you should be deploying, and we'll see.
No, not happened yet.
Not happened yet. Okay,
not happened
sorry.
yet. Yeah.
Take it back from the press.
But soon.
All right.
Almost there. Yeah.
Ritu. I think I'll just request you, because we touched on it right in your introduction, and this journey from IDG to Chirate. And I know that when Sudhir talked about it to me, and he told me anecdotal people telling him that it can't be done, right? And from there to where more than 50% of your fund is domestically raised. I'm sure there have been a lot of learnings that you can share with us.
Sure, it was not an easy decision at all. The reason we did it because IDG's founder passed away, and the brand was sold to a Chinese company which did not align with our interests.
I see.
And it was actually Mr. Ratan Tata who kind of pushed Sudhir and TCM to take that decision. He said it's high time. You're an Indian domestic VC, so you should be having an Indian name. So it took a lot of work, and then this happened. And trust me, after we became an Indian venture capital with that name, we've seen more flows coming in from domestic investors. But jokes apart, see, we've been raising funds from domestic investors since 2013. And how it happened was our first fund was a pure dollar fund. And when we launched our second fund, we actually looked at the investor base across globally. And we realized that globally, whether it's US and even for that matter China, the largest funds which came in was domestic capital. And you need domestic capital to grow. Let's be honest, HDFC Bank, Infosys, all these companies, or even a Wipro was a startup sometime, right? If we need to grow to a $20, $30 trillion economy, we need more and such companies becoming big. And that can happen when you get capital. And that capital needs to be domestic capital, right? There are a lot of opportunities out there. But again, something in the public market that had been discussed, that how long can the government support? There has to be private support, and that's what is happening. The other thing is there are a lot of opportunities. We've seen that in public markets also. I remember when I started my career, everybody used to talk about fixed deposits being a part of their portfolio. My own dad did not believe in what I was doing. But today, equities is very much a part and parcel of everybody's portfolio. And that's where even private markets are going.
So has he put money in Chirate?
Unfortunately, he's no more.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
No, it's okay.
No, I can say that, it's all looks absolutely sensible and doable in hindsight.
Correct.
I tell you, in 13, 14, when you guys were going out there to do that, everybody said it couldn't be done.
Absolutely, because...
So, if you talk about Viksit Bharat, that's...
Absolutely. No, you're right. Because Indian investors were not exposed to that asset class. As I said, that time, people used to talk fixed deposits. Equity markets itself was a
Correct.
long, tall order to ask. And then you're talking about unlisted space.
For 8 years.
For 8 years. Even today, how much of information is there out there in the market, right?
Right.
So, but cut to today, almost 57 to 58% of our capital is from domestic, and that number is increasing because investors want to participate in this asset class. They also want their children to be participating in this asset class. By the way, interestingly, whenever we go out for meetings, any meeting where the younger generation is a part,
Correct.
100% they invest because they understand tech. And tech is what is changing the world. If today India has to grow, technology GDP will be the largest part of our GDP as we grow, right? While manufacturing and all, there's a lot of work also on manufacturing which is coming from the tech side. So yes, there is a lot of future. I think there is challenges even today where people are investing in listed equity and saying, I'm making returns there. Here
Correct.
I have a gestation of almost 10, 12 years. So those are there, but slowly people are waking up to it and they're embracing this asset class as a part of their asset allocation.
That's exactly what we tell our clients, that, obviously you need to be in the listed markets and the returns have been extremely good, but you have to take a certain perspective of a portfolio and a period of time, and then things seem to look very different, right?
Plus our asset class, the unlisted asset class is also contra to the listed markets. Typically, when there is a lot of liquidity flowing into listed markets, we don't see that much coming into the unlisted space. So it is contradictory. In terms of asset allocation, it works very beautifully.
Ritu, if you could just also share how the performance has been for you guys, that actually might also be helpful for people to know that these are actually very high performing asset classes.
Sure. So we've raised about $1.3 billion. We recently now started raising for our fifth fund, which is an early stage venture capital fund. And we've done our first close at about $100 million, so about 850 crores we've done our first close. We, out of $1.3 billion of commitments that we've raised, we have invested about shy of $1 billion, where our IRR post expenses is at 23% for us.
Wow, okay.
So it's not that you can't make money, it's just, it's slightly more, back-ended rather than being front-ended, because here you don't see NAVs on a daily basis. So you have to have patience. So it is patience capital.
No, I get it. Thank you. Thank you for that. Just to finish on this part, I mean, you just said that you have a fundraising plan. So this is the fifth fund. How big is it? Is it done?
So we're raising about $350 million. We've just done our first close in March.
Is that going to be the largest fund so far that you guys have done?
No, it's closer to what we raised in Fund 4.
Sure.
We raised at $337 million. So we thought let's be around. And frankly, we didn't want to raise a larger fund because we are an early stage and we don't want to be in a deployment pressure. And I'm sure Tej will agree to that.
So is it a longer time frame fund then?
It is a 10 plus 2 year fund.
10 plus 2. Okay. That's interesting. Thank you, Ritu. Thank you. Atul, coming back to you. And in fact, I wanted to also ask you the same question that I asked Ritu right now. You've had a 15-year plus at Premji, so you actually still full cycles, right? So would you care to talk about the performance that you've seen at Premji?
So I can't talk about performance at Premji, but I think overall,
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Or
so
what
I
do you
think,
think should be performance, right? Based on past.
no, I think basically when I moved here, I moved here from US in 2008, and that was, I think, also the time a lot of gloom and doom, even in India, starting in 9-10 because of GFC. And when we when I look back, basically it was a middle class country with a growing middle class, rather, I would say, right? And I think a lot of people were actually focused around that particular theme as a theme for investments. And what it really meant for a lot of funds was there were funds which were going. When you look at the data of that phase, actually a lot of funds that invested in healthcare made a lot of money, in pharma especially. People made money on consumer side, fairly decent amount of money at that time, and financial services. Those were really the three mainstays, broadly, if you recall that era. I think technology was very, very early in its phase, and I know Sudhir and I, DCM, we would chat a lot during those times about how companies were scaling up. A lot of people were very skeptical. I think during that period when initially we kind of looked at a company called Myntra, Policy Bazaar, even I would say a lot of the diligence folks were not convinced that these companies can see light of the day at a later point in time, right? And it was partly because of people not believing that means what these guys are capable of from in terms of efficiency or basically getting products out to customers at their convenience, right? Because taking the store to you rather than you coming to the store. And I think that value proposition, that vision at that time, basically few funds kind of showed that vision, and these companies scaled up from there, right? Means Lenskart, very similar story. It was an online eyewear company, and one of the things we at least felt was chashma naak pe rakhna padta hai.
Yes.
And then you feel the comfort, whether it is comfortable or not, at least. Because I used to wear glasses, so I kind of know that intimately. And as a result, basically, we advise them to go out into the stores or do more offline. And I think they've done a fabulous job. I would say probably one of the best positioned companies in terms of integrating the online with offline really well. And their store experience, their online experience is kind of completely seamless. So I think we have come a long way, I think, in that journey. And the way I see it, basically, similarly, financial services, you see kind of a similar journey. Means whether you look at personal lending, whether you look at channel funding, or other areas, means they are getting kind of completely disintermediated by the technology. It's I think Tej also alluded to. So overall, I think there's a huge role we see moving forward of technology, and I think these companies will continue. Companies which are embracing technology to really get to their customer faster.
Could you give us some sort of anecdotal examples of what you see in the next 10 years as opposed to what's happened in the last 10, 15 years?
Absolutely, absolutely. So look, I think basically, I definitely think that from the financial services perspective, we'll see more and more kind of technology coming into the play. There's a wealth manager, I think Premji Invest just closed a deal in
Yes,
Reserve.
deserve.
Which is again technology-led, basically reach out to HNIs and kind of helping them plan their wealth management goals. Similarly, I think there are many such examples.
No, that's a
that are happening
perfect
in this
example.
space, right?
Absolutely, we love that example out here.
Yeah. And similarly on industrial side, we are seeing a lot of opportunities as well. So as a fund, because of that, we feel that consumer financial services and manufacturing are, and obviously the technology part, the enterprise technology, because we have such a large set of resources available in the country
Yes.
to develop products and really world-class products. So I think a lot of these companies will fall into these 4-5 segments as we go forward over next 10 years. Means in technology, for example, we are seeing a focus on precision manufacturing, which because of the auto component guys being there for the longest time, just like IT services was there, came the product companies in technology. Similarly, we see auto component guys leading into basically a lot of this precision manufacturing,
Correct.
whether it be now for aeronautics or it be for more high value product or high value added products. Similarly, EMS coming in is going to, I think, create another set of growth. So going back to, I think, when you said that, are you going to cut down workforce or are you going to add? I think these industries are leading to more addition in workforce, but more high value added workforce.
I agree, yes.
I remember I gone to China in early 2000s and actually mid 2010, 2012. And they were just transitioning from commoditized industry to high value add industry. They said we have done enough of basically Hawaii chappal manufacturing and clothing manufacturing. We want to build turbines. We want to build aeroplanes. We want to build other things because we have kind of reached to at that level in manufacturing. I think we are just starting on that journey in manufacturing. And for a developed country or Viksit Bharat, manufacturing is going to be one of the key things. Similarly, basically enterprise tech, you know it, and we've seen a lot of companies that basically that have come out of India. It used to be the case that most of these companies would get stuck at a glass ceiling of about $10-15 million.
That's correct.
Of revenue. Today, I think most of these companies are breaking that. Means you look at many companies.
You have a spot draft you can talk about?
So yeah, there are a bunch of these companies, right, which are growing at a very rapid pace. I did about 5 investments, and most of these companies grew within like next 3-4 years at 70-80% growth rates and getting US customers. So this is not just, so basically we used to have very poor product management per se early on. But today that is not the case. We have solid product management teams, we have solid product development teams and sales teams. So I think a lot of those features are coming in. So as a result, those are some of the focus areas that we are very bullish about.
No, I think it's very useful, Atul, that you covered all this, because that essentially explains why funds like yours end up achieving the 23% IRR over such a long period of time. Because these are the kind of bets that you make of high growth companies, right? Companies listed on the stock market, typically would go 20-30% max to max, right? This is a
So
very
the
different.
other important aspect, because I get asked this question, and
Okay.
we are on the road, we get asked this question a lot. Public markets are giving you great returns. Why private equity?
Yes.
And actually, for 15 years, basically, I have seen this journey very closely. Because basically most investors who are setting up family offices, I think they go through this question back and forth, back and forth. Where should my money be? What is the best possible option for my money? And over long periods of time, the compounding is really where which generates the maximum output. And in public markets, there are lots of disruptions. Market is up, you want to be in the market. Market goes down, you are going to pull some money out because you're not, because when things fall, you just can't think that things can go back up again. And as a result, basically, if you were to stay in this market for next 10 years, I'm sure you'll make decent money. But the question is, can you stay in the market for 10 years while it goes up, it does its ups and downs?
Correct.
And timing the market, frankly, you will not make those good returns. I'm sure there are enough examples out there you can read. While private equity, because of its nature of locking money in for 8-10 years, basically
It brings the
just
discipline
enables
in.
you to get that compounding in place. And that is what we have seen. Basically, generally, public markets over long periods of time give you about 12 to 13%. 2006 to 8 was a similar period as you are seeing from 2021 to 2024. Markets were up. The returns ending those years were always about 23-24% in large caps. But over 15-20 years, if you regress the data, what you will find is 12% returns on large caps. And if you look at mid caps, they are about 13% or so, somewhere in that range. There's a smart investor who is very good at picking stocks, can probably do 2-3% better than that. But private equity returns, on the other hand, at least when I look at a lot of the funds data, they have easily beaten those returns by about 7-8% over the same time horizon. So that's the advantage of this
Yes.
asset class, because you kind of get away from the turbulence of the markets.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you, and I think that really helps put it in perspective. Tej, you want to add to that?
No, I was just no. This was great perspective and great data. I just
Tej is going to use it also in his pitch.
why not? So I'm after VC before PE. So that's my differentiation. It's got growth VC.
That's why you're sitting in the middle.
That's why I'm in the middle. But no, I think I just wanted to add to what Atul was saying is that the depth of market, and somewhere you would know, is gone dramatically higher, right? We are now 10 years ahead from when I started investing in India, and the scale of companies building up is much faster. Zepto is a story which clearly emerged. Go Colors, which is one of our PE portfolio company, Atul would know, like they have done extremely well.
Yep.
Cello has done extremely well. So they take advantage of also a lot of companies getting listed now, right? So we can, fund them,
That's
grow them, and then now there is actually acceptability of tech companies being listed or non-tech or consumer, right? So I think, in my view, the real market, we're just still very small. I mean, the real market is just starting, like 4 trillion, not even like 3.5. So abhi to bahut journey hai. So I think that's why the excitement should be even double.
So can you get a little granular? What are you looking at ICICI Ventures VC fund
So
now?
we are looking at all our VC friends to supply us good companies. So we, our job becomes a little bit, easier, and pick from there, which we believe are, going to scale at, like Atul was saying, at least 60%. So not necessarily, we're not doing any seed and A. So we are coming on B. And the idea is to, invest there so we can help them grow much
So any
faster.
particular sectors?
So
any particular
consumer,
theme?
fintech, continue to do that. And then obviously we have a private equity arm, then IPO team.
Any
So
particular accent, given that there's a larger bank sitting on top and gives you a certain kind of leverage?
Yeah, so leverage is,
In
like I said,
relationships?
in relationships, the opening, like for example, well, not only ICICI, but with Go Colors story, then EBO strategy, like a lot of the people know how to sell online, but how to go offline, where to open stores, where to market, what to do, all that playbook is set. Also a bit of a PE playbook is set. So I think that's where we want to help the organizations kind of grow in that direction. Yeah.
I'd like to ask the same question from Ritu. Ritu, with the Viksit Bharat theme and the new fund that you have in place, which is a 10 plus 12 years now, which is halfway there, right? So, any change in strategy? Not really change. Is there some addition to it? Some new thoughts on it? Keeping in mind
So,
the direction.
we follow a very clear strategy, which is we invest in companies which use technology to disrupt the way businesses are. And it's just, this canvas is blank. Still, a lot is developing. There is a lot of technology innovations which are happening across sectors, right? So, while we are very well known for our consumer tech investments, but we've also invested in a lot of other interesting opportunities even earlier. So it's not something new that we are doing. We're following the same theme, looking at companies which use technology to find newer business ideas or even change. Let's be honest, all the businesses that we have seen, which has been done for decades, are we using the same methods? No, we don't, right? Today, we spoke about, if somebody has to write an email or something, everything today you can do through AI. There's so much changes which are happening, and there is more and more changes coming across various sectors. Forget consumer. There's changes happening on climate tech, which was not something which was spoken about earlier. There is space tech. There is robotic manufacturing. Interestingly,
I wanted to hear those areas more than. So we know that consumer, financial services, consumption themes, they're themes that have worked well and will work well. There's no question
Correct.
about it.
Correct.
So I would love to also hear about what we are seeing, like you mentioned also precision manufacturing, EMS, etc. What are those areas that you guys are looking at Chirate?
Lot of upcoming technology, even in manufacturing, robotic, factory and warehousing automations. So there's a lot of work happening there. Deep tech is our focus. So in deep tech, we cover every sector, anything where technology is the heart of it, right? So it doesn't matter which sector. Yes, you're right that consumer will continue to be the mainstay, and any which ways, all the technology is targeted towards the consumer, directly or indirectly, right? So we will continue to look at it, and we assess almost 3,000 to 4,000 deals in a year, right? And that's the kind of work which is happening. That's the kind of ideation which is happening at various levels. We
And
started.
you're seeing that kind of deals coming.
Yes,
There's so
yes,
much
yes.
innovation happening at the ground
Absolutely.
level. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Interestingly, the newer founders are founders with a lot of fire in their belly. They have this thing where people who already are there, so it is now aspiration driven. And that's why they are putting in their best. And hence a lot of new ideas. They want to achieve something, and they want to run their businesses.
Got it. That means they will go IPO.
Some of them will, yes.
That's good.
They
I
will
know
always
it's
be.
it's been a change. The last year and a half has become more of a reality than it ever was before, right? And I'm loving it. It's a great change that's happening.
Absolutely, Sumer. So 18 years, we've seen our fourth IPO now. But the way this, and again, the markets have changed. Earlier, companies had not scaled. Even our markets, our listed markets were not deep enough. Today, with the kind of capital which is flowing in, that is now embracing startups also listing, right? Listed markets reward profits. Startups
Correct.
are not necessarily profitable. So today, listed markets are warming up to that, and that's a good thing. So yes, we will see a lot more companies, and that's what I said. Zomato has become profitable after it's got listed. So you will see many more companies heading that way, and they start planning
And
their
Ola
way for that.
Ola happened today.
Ola happened
So,
today.
there you
Next
go.
week, First Cry is happening. So yes.
Yes. Okay. Last couple of questions for Tej and Atul, and then open to you guys to ask questions. Tej, 45% of the exports actually happen from MSME, right? And so, are you seeing some plays happening in this space which actually help? Because MSMEs by nature don't have the same skill sets or the capabilities to sell overseas. And when I'm talking, there are lots of stuff that they could probably do on the e-commerce front. So and there are lots of financial payment systems that are required to help them be more seamless. So are you seeing plays in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. You're hitting the right chord. So I think China plus one is clearly working. You've seen it on ground. Now it's no more like, is it working? I think there are bunch of companies we've already seen. Yeah, so I think across the board on various sides, I think she just alluded to space tech, etc. So there's company I've invested at an angel level, Bellatrix. They're getting first contract from SpaceX. So that's another example of cross-border. I think whether Trump or Harris, whoever comes, I feel this trend is going to continue. Having worked with Chinese organization, I know that Chinese economy is struggling big time, and they'll figure out some way. But this China plus one strategy seems to be working across the board. Invested in a cross-border logistics company as well. And last one, if you remember,
yes,
they are also doing same trying to increase supply from small towns in
correct.
India.
That's a good example.
Yeah, Bazaar is another example. The company,
Yes.
Nishant company, which is also trying to.
There's some on the payment side too who have come up to make it easier. I think Shiprocket is now helping in the e-commerce side.
Correct.
Do it in faster turnaround time. So yes, it's definitely needed.
Yeah,
for sure.
Much required.
Atul, last question for you before I let you go at least. Viksit Bharat is about empowerment of Indians, etc. Right? And we know that what's actually tech doing is creating oligopolies. Oligopolies, right? And we won't name them, right? But it's like the Voldemort thing, the one you don't mention. But there are in logistics, transportation, food delivery, etc., etc. ONDC. Do you see this coming up and actually creating a more level field? Because any oligopoly is not good for the larger growth of the economy.
So basically, I think ONDC has done a fabulous job when it comes to B2B procurement overall. And that's a very large market, of course, right? So it's not a winner-take-all market as such. But when you get into the B2C side of things, right, B2C side of things is a slightly different ballgame because it is not just the price. It is customer centricity of the organization that is a lot more important. I think if you look at from the perspective of payment space, UPI is a fabulous product, right? Makes it so easy and so frictionless for anybody to really do the payments that even a small vegetable vendor in a small town or a village is ready to accept it. So I think that is, in my view, what the government did there or NPCI did there is commendable. And I think more such models have to emerge if we want to stop oligopolies where basically government creates these highways and gives access to people to build business models around it.
Do you see investment opportunities coming up around ONDC for yourself?
Definitely, I think there will be more and more stuff that will come up in this space. Means today we'll probably wait and watch how all of this develops.
Probably the second phase that your next fund will probably do.
Even in this fund, because see, I think people are starting to already think about business models on top of UPI. Now, as I think that evolves, we will definitely look to see more and more opportunities. But I think, from our perspective, the way we kind of look at the world is technology is becoming like English in some ways, right? You need the basically English to be there. Or a communication language, right? So that kind of binds all of the other things. But it's a hygiene. And I think for us, the most important thing that gets us to invest into businesses is unit economics. Zomato turning profitable, or Policy Bazaar turning profitable, or Amagi turning profitable, or any company basically that is out there listed, FirstCry, or you name it. These are because there are certain they are kind of they have a certain unit economics that makes them achieve that profitability. They can grow at a very fast pace and may not turn profitable, but the business model was always there for them to turn profitable, yes. Right? And I think some of this technology that you talked about, whether it be ONDC product that the government brings or UPI or other things, I think they are reducing the cost of building technology in many ways, right? So they also reduce the burden on companies and help them become
That's very well
profitable
said, yes.
faster. So I think overall, as government thinks about basically creating more of these information highways, if I may, it will probably help companies to achieve profitability faster, maybe able to get services to people at more affordable rates and still be profitable. And I think that really is what excites me about India, because Ms. Bharti Airtel in those times was giving data to people at the most economical rates all over the world, right? Nowhere data was so cheap. And even today, I think we are probably one of the cheapest economies from that perspective, where data is so cheap. And that's the power of, I think, just the scale and volumes and stuff. So I think as India,
No,
we
very
are
well said,
placed.
yes. Think of it as something which is actually bringing the unit economics down in some sense, right? Because it just makes it so available, reusability of it, etc. No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, over to you guys. Questions for our esteemed panelists? Or have I kind of asked too many questions already? Please go ahead.
Panelists did say that China Plus One is working well, but is the global outlook China Plus One the way to go, or there's been a lot of news coming and not coming from China? So any insight you could share?
So, may I know your name? Prasad. Okay. Sure, sure. No, good question, Prasad. See, I think overall, at least our view is that India as such is a large economy by itself. There is a huge amount of domestic consumption, and on top of that, you add basically the exports that can happen from here. It will probably not work in every category that one wants to see it, because when it comes to high volume, low price space, China beats us hands down. Means I have seen this in multiple companies. They have the economies of scale, if I may, to that extent. Recently, actually, so I'm an investor as an angel in one of the companies, and they just moved their base from China to India. And I asked them, why are you doing that? They supply products to US. Is it the quality? Is it the price? What is it? Why are you moving it to India? Because you again have to ship it from India. And India that doesn't has that kind of shipping logistics per se to really supply cheaply to the US shores, right? The quality variation apparently for a new product of their scale and size is probably not there in that country, and it is costing them a lot of money to really build that kind of steel or plastics or other things. And they were able to do that at a certain scale because they connected with some other people in Pune area, so they relocated to Pune. And their cost apparently is down by about 10 percentage points on gross margins by just shifting it from China to India. Now that is because probably it is MOQ question, because if you don't have that large volumes, then you may have a little bit of a problem. But I think overall, there's another company that was there in my portfolio where we again saw a similar behavior, where when they moved things to India, they were able to actually get at a lower cost compared to China. And that was happening because of economies of scale in India. So this is more about economies of scale. But I think otherwise, if I look back into the overall world economy, if you're referring to, is the world changing? And are people putting guardrails around countries exporting products there? I think the world order is definitely changing, right? Over last 10 years, what it was earlier, it was globalization everywhere, and one can send anything from one place to another. I think that is changing to some extent. There are certain wanted countries and there are certain unwanted countries, and I think that China-US rift is causing US, which is the largest market in the world, to some extent kind of block a certain set of countries from entering, getting their products in. And India is trying to do the same, by the way. So to that extent, I think a lot of the companies are actually getting benefited. We have seen lots of companies, and we are in touch with a lot of companies which are probably going to emerge in our pipeline, where they are seeing a growth which is 60-70% in manufacturing space, which was unprecedented in their lifetime in the past. Basically, last 20 years, they would probably not see that kind of growth. But they are seeing it, and they are getting companies, the customers to say, why don't you set up the capacity? We are there for you. So I think it is really more about sector to sector and segment to segment. But in certain segments, as I think you may be alluding to, where China has a very strong presence and quality advantage, we will find it hard to catch up for some time. That's my only view.
One example I can give is because I used to work with Fosun, so we did that Gland Pharma deal, and the primary reason that deal happened was just because of the cost arbitrage on the labor side. There was like the technology-wise, obviously Chinese are still ahead. I think labor-wise we are at least 8x sometimes better, depending on which areas of places you set up factories, right? So I think even for Apple moving some of the stuff here, one obviously geopolitical, but second is also, you get cheap labor, right? We still, whatever said and done, a lot of population doesn't make that much money, right? So there is a massive cost arbitrage. So that's what I wanted to add. Yeah.
Wanted to check, do you guys also look at, principles of responsible investment, ESG principles, UN sustainable development goals, those kind of criteria as well when you are evaluating investments? Is that also something which, your investors would ask you for? Like on the public equity side, a few years back, there was a slew of, new fund offers, at least on the public market side, which were on this ESG theme related. And they initially garnered a lot of money, and later on things have kind of tapered off since then. The whole idea was there were clients were not really willing to sacrifice returns for the ESG portion, I mean, that was the view. Is that something which comes, do you use that in your due diligence as a framework?
So we definitely do. And I think, look, there are certain, you have to find ways to improve the overall environment around social status around you. I worked in an organization where basically our LP or rather Mr. Chairman used to think that, thinks that way, right? So I think a lot of my thought process is still imbibed in that. And what we have generally seen is companies that are, of course, you have to generate profits. You can't sacrifice profit, but at the same time, it shouldn't be at the cost of environment in some ways. You have to take measures to improve that. And companies which are cognizant of that and are consciously doing things, they generally get at least a couple of turns better multiples than companies which are not doing that. And that has been consistent performance behavior also that we have seen, at least in my investment journey over the last 15 years here in India and earlier in US. That has been a very consistent trend that I have seen. So I hope that answers.
Thank you, that does. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'd like to add, it's the same with Chirate.
Please. Go ahead.
Yeah, just adding that it's the same with Chirate, and I think a lot of it comes from Premji because Sudhir and TCM both were there. But yes, we follow a very strict ESG policy, as well as, though we're not an impact fund, but we do track what our companies are creating as an impact in our economy and at the ground. We do keep a track of that, and as Atul rightly pointed out, companies who follow an ESG practice have always generated better returns over a long period of time. In the short run, you will not see the impact, but the long run, it does definitely make an impact.
No, I completely take Atul's point, is that over a longer period of time, you'll find a couple of X's that actually come about because of focusing on ESG principles. You don't necessarily have to, for the sake of impact, sacrifice returns. I think that's very clearly proven out in the last 10, 15 years of investing. Gentlemen, they wanted to ask a question. Please go ahead. Okay, you have another. We'll keep that the last one though. Please go ahead.
Due to the geopolitical conditions now, but how does companies like us get access to private equity like what you're mentioning? Usually MSME, B2B is not in favor. It's all the tech or a D2C or a consumer product companies that are able to get private equity very easily. What would be your take on it?
So interesting.
I like that question.
No, so I think, look, basically, when I say tech, and that is why basically the way I think about tech is a lot different than a lot of the funds that are completely focused on tech, right? Because in my view, tech is an enabler. Tech cannot be the whole and soul of things, right? Because it helps you improve your quality of service. It helps you improve your quality of product, and so on and so forth. So as a result, basically, I think what we have generally seen, and we have been investors in the past as a fund in manufacturing companies which are into commodities as well as chemicals and other things. I think tech plays still a very important role in all of those companies in terms of getting better quality, in terms of basically also improving the traceability of the product in many cases. And there are many other use cases you can think about: procurement, I think logistics and other areas. So I think that seamless integration is definitely going to help. Now, obviously, as I said, MSME, B2B is definitely an interesting space, and I think it's growing very well. There are funds that are focused around that. Means we ourselves are quite excited and looking at companies which are in that space. We are not saying that they have to do something with I don't know what they can do with a high-end NVIDIA processor put in their office, right? I don't think they can do generative AI to create their product. But at the same time, I think they can definitely, they have to do what they are doing best, using whatever possible things that they should be using. And that's our definition of tech, right? In terms of funding, there are funds that are focused around these sectors. I think one of the things that Sumir was asking, where I feel that there is gap still, is we have seen a lot of MSME companies post-COVID. Of course, they were the hardest hit when we really go into the details. And still, I think when you look at funding for these companies, even from banks, they have the hardest time getting even inventory funding or funding against receivables, so factoring, etc. It's very hard.
Normally anchor-led models only.
Yeah. So I think people have to, as a country or as a government, whatever you want to call it, I think we have to focus a lot more on that and make capital accessible there. Because these companies have humongous potential when we think about it. Because I met several founders, and they are just basically struggling to run from one place to another. They can easily expand. They have the orders, but they just are not able to get the capex to achieve that order demand, and that's the problem.
Well, you just covered the same thing that he said, that, I need capital.
No, and that is why I said there are funds that are doing it. Means there are several funds here and in Bombay which are actually focused around manufacturing.
Yes. Prasad, you had a question? This is the last one we'll take.
Yeah. One of the newer sectors which you said was precision manufacturing as a new area. We were not exposed to this. We don't have to take this as a question here, but I would like to understand more on that area at some point of time.
No, sure. Basically, actually, the person sitting right next to you is my partner, and he is an expert in that, so he can talk a lot more about it. But I think there is a lot more happening from the process perspective that we see, and with the quality focus. I think the similar set of industries, whether you look at plastic extrusion, means Apple is now asking in India, because there is very little capacity, even in paper packaging, if you really think about it.
It's the box that Apple has where the phone is kept. Not many companies in India have that capability to produce that box. That is more, you can call it more commoditized, it's in paper packaging space. But I'm saying that is just a very simple things, right? So we are seeing a lot more such things that are actually coming to fore. In India, when you even look at auto components, we were talking to one of the guys, they have been getting a tremendous amount of orders from aeronautics side, HAL and DRDO side, for space tech or for defense purposes, simply because they have been in auto components for such a long time and making some critical components. So clearly, I think the focus is shifting towards, do you have the capability to do it? And how do we really partner with you after that? Can you handle our volumes? Because some of these companies, the biggest question they have is, are these guys going to be able to provide me a product with consistency in quality? And that, I think, is one of the key things.
I hope you got your answer, and then you have somebody next to you. You don't have to look further than that. And maybe that's something you guys can take over, drinks and all that. Thank you so much for your patience and sharing your insights with us. It's been really pleasurable. I'll request Ruchir to come and just give us a token from our side of our appreciation. Richard, please. Thank you, Atul. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ritu. Thank you so much. With that, we bring this session to an end.